Being a teacher, I want to remind that these are just my perspectives. So, just one way of looking at some aspect of practice that occurred to me. And what I want to talk about tonight is this phrase we hear sometimes: "think non-thinking." Think non-thinking. And Roshi Daido Lori um, is one of the current era. He passed away a number of years ago, but he's one of the current era teachers that I've heard this from probably more often. Um, and our friend Gakyo and Hoden both practiced with Daido in New York at Zen Mountain Monastery, and he mentioned this a lot. This think non-thinking idea. So it I've been around this, but I was pondering, how do we really understand this idea or non-idea of non-thinking, and really, more importantly, how do we practice it? You know, how do we do this thing? There's a Japanese word, hishirio, that roughly translates as non-thinking, and this appears throughout the Zen lineage. It appears quite a bit in Dogen's Fukan Zazengi from the Shobogenzo, and in Dogen's contemporary or successor Keizen Zenji in the Zazen Yojinki. Both of them lived in the 13th century in Japan. And in some of Dogen's writing about this, and I'll refer to Dogen a few times in this, he uses expressions about this non-thinking that are intriguing and maybe pointing somewhat toward what it means. Steadfast sitting is one of them. Another one, drop the mind, the intellect and consciousness, leave thoughts, ideas, and views alone. Have no designs on becoming a Buddha. Do not judge true or false. I'm going to share a few things here from others, and then I've got my own words that I'll share with you. Uh, Barry McGid is just a little bit older than I am. He was a student of Joko Beck, and he's a teacher in New York, and he's a medical doctor, I think, but he's a psychotherapist. Um, and he refers to this non-thinking as something that people both in Dogen's time and even today find confusing, misunderstanding it to mean don't think. Don't think. And Barry says that a better translation of non-thinking is just think, like just sit. And Barry says our thinking is not something that contaminates our mind or something that we're trying to get rid of. We let it be there, but empty of intention. Barry says, let thought just be thought, not something we have to do anything about whatsoever. So this phrase goes back even earlier yet. Dogen and Keizan were in Japan in the 1200s. Back in the 8th century in China, in what we call the golden age of Zen, Yakusen Igen, there's a story that Dogen refers to in the Shobogenzo, and it's very, very short. After great master Yakusen Kodo had finished a period of zazen, a monk asked him, "What do you think about as you sit so intensely?" And the master said, "I think not thinking." The monk asked, "How can you think not thinking?" The master replied, non-thinking. So in this story, there's this distinction that arises between not and non, which gives me something to think about. um, perhaps I take away from that that not is kind of an opposition. It's a position. And non-thinking is non-positional. Let's see what else Dogen has to say here. Um, he has a fascicle called Learning Through the Body and Mind, which I believe was also in the Shobogenzo. And he says, the stage of non-thinking is beyond egocentric cognition. If you reach the state of non-thinking, you will realize the true luminous nature of mind. Non-thinking must become the eye through which you view phenomena. The activity of every Buddha is based on non-thinking. This is right thought. Sitting until the cushion is worn away is also right thought. So here Dogen's very clearly distinguishing between non-thinking and not thinking. And then we can go back even, another step further, back to the third ancestor of Zen in China. Japanese name is Sosan, but he was Chinese. Chinese name is Sung San, and he's in the latter part of the fifth. He lived over 100 years actually. Latter part of the fifth, all the way through the 6th century. And he has 4 lines about this topic. The empty enlightenment illuminates itself. There is no need to the slightest mental effort. It is a realm of no thinking, a realm beyond the apprehension of reasoning and emotions. And then once more coming back to Barry McGid, he says, that's ultimately what you're going to be left with just sitting. There is no handbook that tells you how to go beyond thinking and not thinking. You just have to sit, and it's through the process of sitting that you will realize Yao Shan's non-thinking. So my reaction to this is the point of non-thinking isn't to suppress thoughts. What I'm taking from these various teachers and masters' expressions is, suppressing thought would really fall into the not thinking category. Typically, I think we would say that if thinking stops, you're dead. So how is this non-thinking different? Dogen said, when a thought arises, be aware of it. When you are aware of it, it will disappear. Continuously put aside everything outside and make yourself into one piece. That really got my attention. Into one piece. And make yourself into one piece. Am I not already one piece? Seiju knows so much more about this than I do, so I'm wading into waters that I don't know how to swim in. But our brains are extraordinarily complex and efficient, and unconsciously they take care of all of the essential systems of my body without me having to choose or decide or monitor or remember. I wouldn't. I'd forget. So we definitely don't want to stop that kind of brain activity. when we have a problem to solve, when I have a problem to solve, usually my brain's available to help, and I can call on memory, what I learned in the past, mistakes I've made, what not to do, what works better, problem solving skills, reason, logic, creativity. And I surely want this amazing toolbox available to me when I need it. So I don't want to turn that off. So think non-thinking isn't meant to demean or to stop any of that activity. I don't want to have to remember to breathe. Thank you, brain, for doing that for me. But I gotta say that, I gotta ask myself, how much of my day when I might suggest that I'm thinking has nothing whatsoever to do with running my circulatory system or my digestive or my respiratory or with solving a problem or planning my next move or surviving a tiger attack. How much of it is not involved in those essential things? And for myself, I got to say, probably 95% of it. 95% of it is nonsense. Past and future anxiety, ideation, daydreaming. And who chose that? Whose decision is that? That my mental wheels are just turning and turning and turning, worrying about what's going to happen next. Or replaying that scene where I should have stood up to that guy and told him off. Or fantasizing, what I'll do when the session's over. Boy, I can't wait for this to be over. I'm going to go do this. Who's choosing to do that? That's not happening on autopilot. Who's in charge here anyway? I had this notion, our brain is an organ, arguably vastly elaborate, the most elaborate one we have, I think, perhaps, I'm not sure. But it's still a body part, just like my hand. And aside from certain medical conditions that I would say are exceptions, for the most part, my hand doesn't decide on its own to steal stuff in the store or to grope people or to sock them. I'm pretty much in charge of my hand. I've got good control over my hands. And my feet, too, for the most part, I think. Perhaps less so my mouth. That has had a mind of its own sometimes. But speaking for myself, I can say that all too often I'm definitely not in charge of my brain and my thoughts. I get triggered by all kinds of stuff, and my brain has a life of its own. It reacts and takes off running. Not everybody has the same triggers, but we can play around with this just a little bit. If we just get still here for just a moment, and then I'll say a few things and see if they trigger you. Napping in a hammock on the beach in Baja. Your mom's spaghetti. Hodin's not here tonight, but the Grateful Dead. A car crashing into a crowded sidewalk. Here's a universal one. The best sex ever. We all react to stimulus. Thinking not thinking is not to tamp that down or to stop it. Reactions happen. They're normal. What world would I be living in if I didn't have reactions? Once again, Dido said, abide in neither thinking nor non-thinking. Abide in neither thinking nor not thinking. Thinking is one side. It's linear, sequential. On the other side, you have not thinking, which is blank consciousness. We call this state eyes staring out of the coffin, or making a living in a ghost cave, or being stuck on the top of the mountain. Dogen said, Dido said, Dogen's Zen and Yao Shen's Zen and the Zen of the great masters wasn't about leaving the world. It was about manifesting the Dharma in our everyday activities. Thinking falls on one side, not thinking falls on the other side. How do we leap clear of these two extremes? And Dido answers his own question. He says, Yao Shen says, by non-thinking. Non-thinking has no such edges. It's the boundless mind of samadhi that neither holds on to nor lets go of thoughts. This doesn't mean suppressing thoughts either. Dido finished this section by saying, in his years of practice, he's seen a lot of us, Western students, trying to forcibly quiet our minds by making a big barrier that keeps things out. He said, I've run into students who have been working on Mu for 10 or more years, who are like boilers ready to explode because they've been suppressing stuff that needs to come up and be let go of. There's no way that you're going to see Mu if you're suppressing or holding on to anything. The mind must be truly empty out before you can be Mu. This section from Shobogenzo, Fukan Zazengi, is one of Dogen's best known writings. And it goes into a great deal. It basically translates as, well, long ago in another Zen lineage, we translated it as Zazen rules. And it literally is, the basics of how to sit. Explains in great deal exactly, how to sit your butt on the cushion, how to hold your torso, where your eyes look, your ears should be over your shoulders, how to place your hands, your tongue, how to breathe naturally, and more. And back then we used to chant this all the time. And I didn't really understand why. And my feeling at the time was, okay, I got this. Now what's next? Turns out, this is what's next. That description of sitting or bodily comportment is what's next. It is our zazen. Taking that posture, mindfully, carefully, deliberately, is our zazen, is our non-thinking. When we think non-thinking, we're not trying to suppress thought, nor are we being carried along by it. We just remain here, fully embodied, fully aware of our breath, or a koan, or the wholeness of what we're experiencing. We're fully engaged, we're all in, we're completely consumed with taking that posture. It's what's next. It's enough. We breathe or we count or we otherwise engage or practice, whatever that might be. We're aware of those thoughts coming and going, and also that they begin to slow down into over time, and they do diminish. We find the space to just be here in stillness and awareness, and that space grows and warms and deepens. Is this all there is? Yes. And this too. Who thinks I need more?